everyone, I'm Diane Macedo. This is FoxNews.com Live's Business Hour. I'm in for Lauren Simonetti at the moment. And we're going to be talking a lot about jobs today. Taking a quick look at the market, we are seeing the Dow to the plus side, up by triple digits right now. A lot of that has to do with some positive earnings reports that we got from some big names like Goldman Sachs and Coca-Cola earlier today. But of course, whenever you talk about the economy, everybody wants to talk about jobs. And a lot of times we hear about the lack of jobs in this country. What people don't talk about quite as often is the lack of Americans often that are skilled enough to fill many jobs that actually are out there and are vacant, and that many times employers are forced to outsource to employ those jobs. So our next guest, Dr. Tracey Wilen-Daugenti. You're going to have to help me here. Daugenti, I'm sorry, Tracey. Is here with the Apollo Research Institute, and I know you guys have looked a lot into this whole issue of the skills gap. And you know, everybody always thinks about education when it comes to this, but a lot of these people have degrees, and yet they still aren't able to sort of fill that gap. So how do you go about doing that?
That's true, Diane, and thank you very much for having me. A lot of the jobs out there requires skilled individuals as well as educated individuals. In some cases, it's a mismatch. As you know, unemployment varies from metro area, from state to state. So there's a lot of factors involved. And so
one of the things you say is that you need to address the needs of working adults. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So when you think about it, when I started working, it was a classical world. The work span was about 20 years. Today, people are working 50 years, and you can see evidence 5 generations in the workforce. So many people have to continually educate, continually reskill. And so you work and learn at the same time, right? In your 50s, you're not going to take off and go to a residential campus. So we have to support this new type of thinking, this new type of employment, and how do we keep people employed?
The sort of multitask education.
You do. You do. There's a very large percentage of adults today in the United States who are actually working and going to school at the same time. And it's important that we offer programs and support for these adults.
Okay, and you say work in tandem with businesses. How do you mean that?
Well, you work during the day, and then you might be taking courses on night, on weekends, or online to be able to enhance your skills, add a certification, add an advanced degree.
And now, do you have any recommendations for people looking to do that, and maybe ways that they can approach an employer and see if there are any benefits involved to doing that, or if their schedule can be adjusted, or is it not advisable to make waves in that way?
Oh, no, absolutely. Many companies offer tuition reimbursement. In fact, I used it myself to get through 15 years of education. So many employers you'll find will support individuals. You just have to ask. People have to sit down with their managers and ask, what kind of plan can I put in place that makes sense for the firm and makes sense for my career development?
And you say implement industry-specific credentialing programs. Is that more on the side of the universities and schools out there?
No, usually it's tandem. You know, you can work together, industry, academia, and the individual. I worked at Cisco System for a long time as an executive, and in '97 we started the Cisco Network Academy, which is a flagship certification program, over 4 million students. That is integrated with high schools, integrated with community colleges, integrated with universities and training partners, and it's been very successful to close the gap in IT.
And of course, getting the education doesn't always pay off if you don't actually get the degree to walk out with it. So how do you go about improving graduation rates? Because that's another issue.
Well, our research institute did a study on working learners and what are the factors that really inhibit people from graduating. A lot of it has to do with 1, self-confidence, 2, the fear of going back to school, 3 is not having family support, and 4, not having worker support. So there's a lot of factors involved. But you can get certifications. You can do it slowly. I mean, we have many students who take a long time to complete their degrees and are still working.
So do you see a bachelor's degree as sort of a minimum kind of level that workers should hit if they're trying to emerge into a workforce like ours?
Right. So as I talked, when I went to school, a classical world, it was a high school degree or a liberal arts degree, and you could cover yourself from most employment. Today, we're in a technology-based world, so the bachelor degree has really increased in preference by employers if you look at the job openings. In fact, the Institute of Medicine is now requiring that nurses in particular move from the associate's degree to a bachelor degree because they equate education and technology with error ratios, and so it's becoming increasingly important in both areas.
And what about for those with a high school education? Is it mandatory at this point that you get a higher education?
No, there's plenty of jobs out there. In fact, a research institute published today that there's over 20 million jobs available for people without degrees. but it has to be, you know, a lot of these are skilled labor opportunities, such as carpentry, electrician, welders. So you do have to have certifications. You probably have to pass an employer test, and in some cases, for example, a truck driver, you can get a license in 5 weeks, but you have to have proven experience driving the vehicles.
Now, and a lot of times people talk about sort of picking vocational areas to study because, you know, you go to a college, you major in watercolors, you come out, that's not going to help you very much. So how do you advise people when they're in the beginning process of all of this and trying to figure out what areas they want to study, what majors they want to pursue?
Exactly, and I think that's a very good point, because I think colleges need to do a better job of starting the thinking process early in the student's career during orientation. I have so many students say to me, I want to work at Google, I want to work at Apple, I want to work at Electronic Arts, but they have no idea. Number one, go out to the website. These companies are putting out more and more information on how to get jobs at these firms and videos. Number two is try to find someone who's working for these firms so that you can learn firsthand what it takes to get a job for one of these companies.
We have a viewer comment here saying there are plenty of jobs out there, just not what folks want to do or are not qualified. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about here, Vinny. I assume Vinny's in the middle of somewhere in this name here, so I'm assuming that's your name here, Vinny. But, you know, that's exactly it. There are jobs out there, but some of the jobs people just don't want to do them, and other jobs people aren't qualified for, and that's sort of what we're at least homing in on the second part of that issue today.
No, you bring up a great point. Truck driving has an 89% turnover rate. Not everybody can accommodate the lifestyle of that kind of job. Are there jobs out there? Absolutely. Are there welder jobs out there? Absolutely. These are hard jobs to do, and people may not want to do them.
And what people a lot of times don't realize is you make a nice living a lot of times doing those jobs because, like you said, they are tough. They are tough to do, and with everybody thinking that they need to go off to a liberal arts college, a lot of people aren't getting the certifications that are necessary to do those jobs, so they're in higher demand.
My recommendation is don't stop your college degree, but I would keep adding to it with certifications and additional education training.
And so where can viewers get more information on all this and sort of looking at the current picture? We're at 7.8% unemployment, and that's not even factoring everybody who's just sort of given up looking for a job. Do you see this getting worse or better?
I think it varies by state. So you have certain states like Nevada at 12%, California, where I'm from, 10%, Rhode Island, 10%, and then you have other states that are doing incredibly well, like Nebraska and North Dakota. So do your skills match the needs in your local area?
And so where can people go sort of to find these kinds of things out?
So number one, I would look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics just to see what the occupations are. It has dramatically increased over time. There's over 33,000 different kinds of jobs out there. It's a lot more than when I was looking. Number two is my research institute, the Apollo Research Institute.org, looks at a lot of the future skills, skills disparity, and career development issues that are top of mind today.
And what age would you advise people to start looking into this?
Oh my goodness, I encourage parents to start with role modeling and opening up the opportunities for their kids and inspiring them. I just visited a high school, and they told me that they had NASA scientists there talking to children about how cool it was to go in outer space, but then what kind of math and science is needed to become your next generation astronaut.
Well, you know, that's at least strikes me as being so important because the common line in school, when I was in school, I'm sure when you were in school, and I'm sure the kids in school now, is when am I ever going to use this? You know, you start learning these math problems that just seem so tedious, or these grammar rules that seem so tedious. And a lot of times kids don't realize how that all ends up folding into what they do want to do one day, but they aren't able to make that connection, so all of these topics seem so much less important than they really are. So if there were a way to sort of make that connection a little more obvious to them, I think that would be really helpful and more motivating.
Absolutely. I have a mother who had a daughter who was really aspiring to be a scientist. She was nervous about being in a lab. The first thing the mother did was introduce her to a very glamorous woman who worked in the pharmaceutical industry and had a fantastic international job. That switched the girl around, and now she's on track to be a scientist. And I'm really excited that mother thought that through to connect her daughter, help her connect the dots.
All right, wonderful. So Dr. Tracey Wilen-Daugenti?
Yes.
Yes, I said it right. Thanks so much for being on. That was really great.
Thank
Again,
you.
You can go to the Bureau of Labor Department statistics site there to get more information on all of that. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, what to do if you work with a workaholic, or maybe you are the workaholic. We'll talk about it all right after this break. Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Macedo. This is FoxNews.com Live's Business Hour. I'm in for Lauren Simonetti today, and we're talking about jobs and sort of the general work environment. Taking a quick look at the markets before we get into it all. We're looking at the Dow up 110 points right now. We did get a lot of positive earnings reports in this morning that has investors optimistic today. But let's see if you're feeling so optimistic about what we have to say next. So next topic is workaholics, and maybe you work with the workaholic, maybe you are the workaholic, but it turns out being the person that's last to leave the office doesn't always make you the most effective person at the office. So we're going to bring in Michael Woodward, Dr. Woody for short. Much easier than our last guest's last name. Appreciate that.
Try to keep it simple.
But so you're talking about the kind of person who's sort of married to their job and maybe feels like they can't leave because they're not doing enough if they do leave on time. But you're saying that's actually not always a good thing. Talk to me about that.
It's definitely not always a good thing, and you got to worry about burnout. And so the perspective we're coming at is if you're a colleague of this kind of person, how do you manage that? And just to step back, keep in mind, workaholics have a compulsion to work. In other words, it's a psychological addiction for those who truly have that compulsion. And so as a colleague or coworker, it's not like you're going to be able to just intervene and cure that or change it overnight.
Right.
So what you have to make sure to do is to manage it so that it doesn't infringe on your life, or so you don't get baited in to, I guess, their lifestyle or their schedule.
Well, that's the problem. It sort of becomes an arm race. If the person next to you is staying late, then you sort of feel bad leaving early, but then they don't want to leave before you leave, and the next thing you know, it's 10 o'clock at night, and you're both sitting at your desk playing solitaire.
Yeah, right.
How do you...
And you might not have actually gotten anything done.
Right.
And like you said at the top of this, the first point I try to make is, you have to run your own race. Don't get baited in or peer pressured into the workaholic schedule, because at the end of the day, it's not about time in, it's about getting results. That's what companies and managers want. So if you're spending extra time there on the workaholic schedule, but not getting any more done, they're going to question, what are you doing?
Right.
So you got to make sure, that's the first thing, is make sure not to get baited in. As my cross-country coach used to tell me, run your own race.
And you say prioritize the tasks at hand. That's sort of how you determine what really needs to get done today and what can wait until tomorrow. Is that the idea?
I do this with executive teams all the time who tell me, Woody, we've got so much we can't get it all done. I'm like, well, that's great. So let's make a list and prioritize it. And do that when you're on a team or working with a colleague who is that workaholic, compulsory worker, so that at least you set kind of a standard of where you're going and direction so that everyone's in agreement. And then after that, set some boundaries around those priorities and getting them done. So what you don't want is to be on the phone with the workaholic at 10 o'clock at night when you've got kids or other things going on in your life, or them calling you at 2 a.m. to fix something. Because here's the thing, just because they have that compulsion doesn't mean that you should, and doesn't mean you're going to get the work done any better or in a more timely fashion. So prioritize first, then you set those boundaries around it and make sure they understand what those boundaries are, because remember, sometimes a workaholic may be doing this, just like in any addiction, as an escape from something else. You may not want to be trying to escape from your family or outside extracurricular things.
You may want to be home, and they may not want to end up being home. Now, subset category here, the perfectionist. and I'm guilty here, and I'm wondering how you help people like me, where, you sort of become obsessed with the minutiae, the details, and because you want it all to be perfect. And so if you sort of have that tendency, how do you determine between what really does need to be perfect and what you can sort of let slide?
Well, Diane, I'm not a therapist, but next time we'll roll the Chase Lounge out here. You could lie down and well talk it through.
Well,
I can bring one of my colleagues out
here. But in terms of time management and getting out, I feel like that's a really important step.
Perfectionism is a bit different than a compulsion to work. That's And one of my rules of thumb has always been, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, and that's what perfectionists tend to do. So their compulsion is a little bit different. It's that drive to make sure that everything is as good as it possibly can be, when in fact it can become counterproductive. With the perfectionist, sometimes you have to point out, again, you set deadlines and you set boundaries and you let them know, guess what? It has to be done at this point in time. And so whether it's as done as it can be, that is what it is. And again, as a manager, that's where you really have to set those boundaries and let them know, here are the deadlines, here's what the benchmark looks like. If you want to go beyond that, nice, but it has to be done in that same time frame.
And another complication here, what if the workaholic isn't your colleague, it's your boss?
Then you have a real challenge on your hands. And again, it always starts with conversations. And I don't sound like the preachy psychologist here, but I say it all the time. And you have to make sure you you set the parameters around your relationship early on, and you let them know, you know what, this is what I've been hired to do. This is in the purview of my job, and I don't live to work. I do have a life outside of here, and I would hope that you can respect that. And it's okay to challenge your boss when they're hitting you up at weird hours of the night or on the weekends or when you're disconnected. Let them know when you're going to be disconnected and let them know when you're not. But you have to have those conversations very early on, though, up front, because if you allow those behaviors to go on, certainly as an employee, you actually end up reinforcing them, and all of a sudden they're saying, why are you making a dramatic change on me?
So does that come down to being an enabler? What do you mean when you say don't be an enabler?
That's probably the biggest challenge here, because remember, workaholism is a psychological addiction. So when you take on that or pick up the extra slack for that workaholic, or if you sympathize or empathize with them too much, when they're, woe is me, we got to work harder, we got to do more, we got to keep pushing even the perfections
and you're all,
on these
you
details.
Poor thing, you were here so late
Yeah,
yesterday.
let me help out, what can I do? You just reinforce their addiction. You reinforce their psychological need to be there and continue pushing, especially when it's stuff that doesn't really matter, little details. And you have to be willing to confront them and point them out.
All right. Well, Dr. Woody, it was great having you on. Great talking to you. Thank you for the psychological consultation on my own issues here. Coming up, we're going to talk about what to do if you have a bad boss. We're looking at the Dow up triple digits. We'll be back right after this break. Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Macedo. This is FoxNews.com Live's Business Hour. I'm in for Lauren Simonetti, and today we're talking about all different things having to do with the job and jobs in general and the workplace. Taking a quick look at markets before we get into our next segment, the Dow is currently up about 114. That's after we got a slew of some positive earnings reports this morning that's giving our markets a boost. But we want to talk about bosses because we just sort of got off that topic with our last guest in terms of what if you have a workaholic boss. Our next guest is here to talk about what if you just have a plain old bad boss. A new survey out this morning says 3 out of every 4 people report that their boss is the most stressful part of their job. So Michelle McQuaid is here, author and workplace expert, to talk to us about all this. And Michelle, first of all, what led you guys to conduct this study?
Well, it started for me a couple of years ago when I had a bad boss and I didn't know what to do about it. But what surprised me most was when I started sharing the story with friends, tales of bad bosses came pouring out. Apparently they were everywhere and none of us knew what to do about it. So I wanted to see if this was true across America or whether I was just in a strange place.
And so talk to us a little bit about the findings of this.
Yeah, so today is National Boss Day, and we started by asking people, would you thank your boss on National Boss Day? And I was amazed to find that more than 60% of employees said they had no reason to thank their boss. Not only that, but more than a third of Americans believe their boss lacks integrity and doesn't work very hard, and 1 in 5 bosses are losing it at the office and shouting at employees.
But doesn't everybody kind of hate the boss? Isn't that one of the things that sort of comes with the territory of being a boss? Nobody wants to be ordered around.
Well, the good news was 38% of employees said they had a great boss. So some bosses are out there doing something right. And yeah, while none of us really want to be ordered around, some bosses are understanding that by appreciating your employees, by building positivity in your teams, by checking into what's going well as what's going wrong, and by giving employees a chance to use their strengths each day at work, what they like doing and that they're good at, can actually dramatically improve relationships in the workplace.
And how do you recommend that bosses deal with employees that maybe aren't in the right field or aren't doing a great job at what they're supposed to be doing at least? How do they face a challenge like that without bringing negativity into the workplace?
Yeah, look, one of the best ways is by helping employees understand actually what their strengths are, what they like doing and what they're actually good at, and seeing if there's a good fit between the job they've actually got and the company that they're working for. Because generally, when an employee isn't loving work, it's because there's not a good match between those things. Helping them find out what they love can also help them find something they would like better and help them move on in a constructive way.
And now you say a bad boss can actually cost the company money. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so research by the Gallup organisation found that bad bosses having a poor relationship with your supervisor costs American organisations $360 billion every year in lost productivity, which is an amazing amount of money going out the door simply for not treating your employees well.
And they also destroy our health. How does
They
that happen?
do. Well, it takes most of us about 22 months to free ourselves from a difficult boss. And during that time, the constant stress and negativity we're under not only undermines our performance at work, but damages our health, destroys our relationships, and can leave us feeling depressed and anxious. Now, the good news is there's plenty that you can do as an employee to improve your relationship with your boss, and you can find some of these today at tellyourboss.com.
So tellyourboss.com is full of some of these tips. Can we get just a little sneak peek of maybe some of these ideas that you came up with? Because, this is, like you said, a very common issue. And I think people, once it becomes a boss and not a colleague issue, people sort of become stuck that they give up because they don't think they have an option.
Absolutely. They feel helpless and overwhelmed and a bit
course.
like a victim, which is the worst way to be in this situation. So all of these ideas come from the science of positive psychology, which looks at how do you bring out the best in people. And the simplest and most effective one is to build some jolts of joy, things that'll put a smile on your face into your day. So it might be listening to a favourite song, watching a YouTube clip, getting out and exercising at lunchtime, or calling a friend and talking about anything but your boss. Anything that'll put a smile on your face will lower those stress levels down, restore some happy chemicals to the brain, and help you find better ways to deal with what your boss is doing.
And as an employee, is there anything you can do to maybe change your boss's behavior? I mean, rather than try to manage or deal with it better, is there anything you can do to really bring about some change there?
Look, it's really difficult to change somebody else's behaviour, be they your boss or not. One of the ways, and it's probably not what you'll feel like doing at first, but I promise that it works, is to actually trying to start finding the things your boss is doing well. Hunt for the good things they're doing and be grateful for them. Say, hey, I really appreciated that. It helps me out when you do this for me at work. That way at least they know what you're wanting them to do more of, because I think there are actually very few bad bosses. There are a lot of good people not doing a great job as bosses.
And if your boss is sort of one of those people that's always busy and has no time, how do you find the right time or the right way to approach them if you do want to talk to them about something?
Yeah, now if you're going to sit down and have that conversation, then it's making sure they've got time. Ask them for it. Say, look, I really need to sit down and talk to you about something, but go in it with the right way. So number one, make sure you know what triggers off your boss's stresses. So when you see them behaving at their worst, have figured that out and don't go in and do that. Secondly, go in with a win-win outcome. There needs to be something in it for your boss and for you, or it's not going to work. And thirdly, hold that conversation lightly. If you go in really stressed out, you're going to trigger that off in your boss as well. So the lighter you can hold that conversation, bit of a smile on your face, bit of levity, the more successful you'll be.
All right. Well, that's tellyourboss.com. We have another... Vinny's back with more comments. This one says, what's worse, a bad boss or a bad spouse? You always find out too late, he says. Vinny, I hope your wife didn't read that tweet. But bad bosses, at least we have some solutions here. I don't know if tellyourspouse.com exists yet, but tellyourboss.com does exist. Michelle McQuaid, it was great having you on and getting these tips from you. We hope that this was all very helpful for all of you. We'll take one last look at the markets before we leave you here. The Dow's currently up about 120, and Lauren Simonetti will be back tomorrow with more business news for you. Again, I'm Diane Macedo. This is FoxNews.com live here, and tune in next hour coming right up now, I should say. Next up is Power Play with Chris Starwall. It's been great talking to you, everybody.